大家好，我1月份在中国用中文讲我的题目啊。今年8月份呢，邓小平周年的110年的周年呢，我也要去北京啊，用中文讲。今天我想用英文讲话。I think if many people are wondering whether the United States is trying to contain China, but I think this meeting is a proof that the United States is not trying to contain China. We want to work with China. And all the years that I have been at Harvard, beginning right after World War II, I think it's clear that we were prepared at Harvard to work with China, and your presence and your future in China is proof that we want to work with China and do everything we can to contribute to its future. Of course, we are only one institution, and the numbers that we can accept are limited, but we are very fortunate to have such outstanding people come to Harvard. I think that at Harvard you can distinguish in Asian studies 4 generations of leaders. It's interesting that the Asian studies really took off just about the same time of 1949, when Chinese leadership was establishing under communist rule. And the first generation, of course, was Professor Fairbank, who established East Asian studies and began to build up a system for introducing it into the general curriculum and carrying on research activities and publications. I had the privilege of being part of the second generation, and Professor Cooper was also part of the second generation. Professor Cooper was a generalist who studied the entire world and also had a particular interest in East Asia. My job was to work on East Asia particularly, and I felt that it was my responsibility, as Fred Hu said this morning, to go out to Asia to learn as much as I could about the developments and then come back here to teach about it. And during that time, I felt that we should invite as many Chinese to Harvard as we could absorb and as they were prepared to come here to take part in our studies. And in 1998, when Jiang Zemin was considering coming to the United States, I felt Harvard should invite him to speak. At that time, many people thought because of June 4th, 1989, we should not invite a dictator. But I felt it was important to keep relations with China and as open as we possibly could, and that the way we help China progress would be through working with them in a positive way. And of course, Jiang Zemin's visit to Harvard was a great success. Right here in this room. And part of the success was that security required us to have people in their seats 1 hour before. And we therefore used the occasion, and Peter Bohl took part, and Bill Kirby took part, in lecturing to the audience about China, to give general information about China to raise the general level. And we were able to use that very, very effectively. The third generation, I think, of Chinese studies is Bill Kirby and Peter Bohl in that leadership group. And now Mark Elliott is our 4th generation leader, and I hope that all of you will work with him and with our dean. It's now, of course, possible that China has become so important that it's too important just for us specialists on East Asia. And people everywhere in the university, the business school and the architecture and design and environmental studies, are having to come to terms with what's going on in China. And we welcome their participation, and we hope they will learn more about China. I have today just 3 points about Chinese leadership. First of all, that it's continuing to learn. I first went to China in 1973, and just 40 years ago. And at that time, China was concerned just about defending itself. Since that time, It has graduated from just defending itself to taking part in the world, and more recently to learning enough about the world that it can help preserve the world system. And that's something new for China, and it's still learning and still has a great deal to learn. I hope they will be more successful than the United States, which I think has made serious mistakes in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I hope you learn from our mistakes and are able to handle those things better. And I hope that you continue sending people to study and learn from the entire world. Second point is that to really lead, China needs to have an appeal to the rest of the world. And I think here there's a great deal of work to be done. As you know, the New York Times cannot be read in China. And many famous American scholars like Perry Link, Lin Perret, and Professor Nathan are not allowed to go to China. If somebody speaks to the Dalai Lama here, China complains. Last year, Japan wanted to sponsor a big program on global health. China decided, since it was angry at Japan, they would not send anybody to take part in that conference. Is that the kind of leadership that will appeal to the rest of the world? I think there are many weaknesses in that system, and I think China needs a great deal to open up if it wants to appeal. Now, of course, it has publicity. The China World, China Daily appears in American newspapers. China has already, as Fred Hu pointed out, economic growth, very rapid. It's moving to innovation. It has technology. But will it have something that can really appeal? Strength alone, military strength alone, will not provide a leadership in the world. It needs to find ways to open up more. My personal role now, since retiring from Harvard, I decided that our responsibility as Harvard professors who've enjoyed the good support not only of our own university but of the entire nation and of the world is responsible to the world. So I try to help play my role in educating Westerners about China. When I retired in 2000, I decided the most important topic was understanding the last 30 years, the development. And so I spent 10 years studying about Deng Xiaoping and his transformation of China. But I feel that for the next stage, China needs to move more into the human appeal, not just the technology ability. And I've decided, therefore, if my health holds up, to study Hu Yaobang for the next few years, because I think he provides, perhaps he was a little ahead of his time, perhaps he made mistakes, but I think some of his desire to build up a more open system where more voices were held and more humane can help point a way to the future of China. I think it's unfortunate that his example set up demonstrations in 1989, but I think that his example can be used in a more positive way to help promote a China that is more humane, that is more open and more democratic. My third point is that I think that China needs to have top leaders who understand the world. I think they were lucky that Deng Xiaoping had spent 5 years in France and a year in the Soviet Union, that Zhou Enlai had spent so many years abroad. I think in that generation, that breadth and perspective was much better than the Mao generation. I think the Mao generation, which did not have those leaders who'd had that foreign experience, really did not have the ability to adapt and the judgment that was necessary. I think you will be part of the generation who will have great knowledge of the West. People like Fred Hu in the economic field, people who are ambassadors in Washington, Cui Tiankai, former ambassador Yang Jiechi. All these people have great knowledge of the West, but you need a political leadership at the top that has a deep understanding. Unfortunately, I think the leaders at the top now have not had enough experience abroad to have the perspective that Deng Xiaoping had, and that even Jiang Zemin had by being in Eastern Europe and Russia and having perspective on his own country. And I hope that the leaders of China in the future will have enough experience that they will listen to people like you who can contribute so much to the future of China and the future of the world. Thank you.